Our presenter for the 1:40 time slot is Will Haskins. He is from Burlington, Connecticut, and will be sharing with us his Capstone project, Roto Tuner, the world's first automatic drum tuner. Please join us in welcoming him.
So like was said, this is my capstone project, the Roto Tuner, the world's first automatic drum tuner. And first we're gonna go over the content. We have some background about me and drumming itself. Then we have the design problem that I'm tackling. Then we get into my exact research, ideation, and prototyping. And then last we'll cover the final product, along with a summary of everything we talked about at the end. So first, some background. So I've been a drummer for over 12 years. I've played with worship teams, independent bands, and different paid gigs. This is how I discovered this particular problem, which I'm about to be talking about. Some of you might be confused, though, in terms of the whole concept of tuning drums. I know a lot of people just kind of figure it's a drum, you just kind of hit it, and that's that. But actually, you have to tune drums much the same as you have to tune guitars. You, after a while, will find that once the drum has been played for a while, it goes out of tune, or it happens where you could break a drum head and end up where the drum is unusable. So again, much like guitars, you have to take the part of the instrument that you're playing on, which in this case is going to be the drum head, and tighten it and bring it up to a good tension. So I'll just give you a demonstration of what a poorly tuned and a well-tuned drum sounds like, just to help you understand where this is coming from. So it sounds like a trash can, but it's an actual drum. And then that's what it should sound like. So the goal is to get from the first one to the second one. And a bit about the physical drum itself. So drums are mostly composed of the hoop, which is the metal ring on the top, which holds the head or the skin down onto the main drum shell. You tighten everything by using the drum key to tighten the tension rod, which screws into lugs, which are then attached to the shell. And there's also a head or skin on the bottom as well in order to help contain the sound. This all will help to give it a round sound. So now to the design problem that I'm actually trying to solve. So the issues I want to fix is that ear tuning is essential to the drum tuning process. This can be really complicated and hard, and it can also take a very long time. And to break that down a little bit more, for ear tuning, the vast majority of drummers do not know musical theory and can't hear pitch very well. They don't have to ever worry about listening to notes any other time when they're playing. You just hit things. So it's a bit of a stretch for a lot of drummers to suddenly be very adept at hearing pitch and realizing, oh, that's a little sharp, that's a little flat. Many drummers don't have that capacity. It's also very complicated. This is a diagram of what tuning drums looks like. You start with number 1 and then move around through the number sequence. And that's the way you're supposed to do it, to not make tension uneven. And even if you do that correctly, it can still end up where your drum sounds off, because you still have to know what pitch you're aiming for. And third, it takes a long time. It can take 5 to 10 minutes per drum if you know what you're doing. There's typically 4 to 8 drums per set, which could be 20 to 80 minutes per set of just hitting the drum, listening, tuning, hitting it, tuning. And so, especially in a live situation where a drummer is in the middle of a concert, they break a head, that needs to be at max maybe a couple minutes between a switch out, because you're in the middle of a song. You need to be able to play the drums to be able to carry the song with it. And it can be very obvious when someone stops playing a specific drum. So it can be really vital in live concert situations. So to rephrase this in a positive way, my goals for the project are to remove the need to tune by ear, make tuning drums simpler, and make tuning drums faster. So now to get into my research phase. I looked at the current market, which has three major categories of solution. And these are the top selling products in each of those categories. So the True Tuner, it works by manually adjusting all of the tension rods at once. You simply place this on top of the drum and then wind it around, and it works by tuning everything at once. The drum dial works by sensing the tension of the different tension rods. It can be kind of complicated, but basically it's just measuring pressure. And then the TuneBot works electronically by reading the sound waves using the onboard mic and then telling you whether you need to go higher or lower. Now, some of the shortfalls of each of these individual products is that the True Tuner, you still have to know what pitch you're going for. You can tune all of them at once, but it's also kind of finicky. It requires a lot of small metal dowels, which can be hard to get them to aim correctly. For the drum dial and the TuneBot, both of those don't actually physically help you tune anything. So it's not faster, it's just more accurate. So that doesn't really help the whole problem. It just helps solve part of it. And even with that part being solved, you still have to, again, know what pitch you're aiming for. It can tell you that your drum says G flat, but what does that mean? You don't know if that's what you're aiming for. So all these ended up where I still felt like there was an opening for a product that helps to combine all these. I next talked to a couple of experts. I talked to Kevin Rooney from Rascal Flatts and Alex Butterworth of True North Rising, both of whom are friends that I know as well. So Kevin talked about durability being a big factor because this is going to be an expensive product if you're going to make it automated, which I thought was really valuable. And then Alex talked about how it seems like it's a useful product for touring bands that all share one drum set. And so I thought that that could help narrow my audience down, where it sounds like I'm going to be aiming for an audience that is expecting to pay a little bit more and is really paying for that top level convenience because it's part of their job, especially. So next, moving into my ideation phase. My first idea was to integrate it into the drum hoop, meaning I figured I could put some motors into the drum hoops, which when needing to tune to a certain pitch, you could probably use some kind of app or something to then engage the motors to tune it. So on the left is just my ideation of maybe some of the different arrangements of the possibilities of where the motor could be in relation to the tension rods, which are, again, the part that is going to make the pitch go higher or lower. So I played around with several different variations on that. And then I also went back and forth on different methods of control. I could either use a phone that plugs into the drum, something that is connected through a power unit so that the drum wouldn't have a battery inside of it, but rather be from an outside source, or some kind of handheld unit which would come with the system so you wouldn't have to necessarily own a phone that could do this. Now, so there's some benefits to the system. It's quick. The tuners would already be on the drums all the time because they're built into the hoops. So that would be faster. There's no resizing because, again, every drum has its own hoop, its own motor that's kind of taking care of itself. There's no need to have an outside product. And then it's a passive design in that there's no batteries on the drum set itself, only in the power bank. So if someone was concerned about, I don't want to attach electronics to my drum set for it like catching fire or some kind of problem like that, there wouldn't be any batteries inside of the actual drums themselves. They would just have the motors and be powered from the outside. Now, this idea had a lot of challenges. Firstly, the motor number. It's one motor per lug, and for a 4-piece drum set, which is pretty small, it'd be 52 motors, which is a lot. And every motor is going to be adding a lot of cost. So this would be a crazy expensive product. Second is motor location. There's no great place for the motors. I showed in my first slide that you could put them on the tension rods, essentially, but that kind of locks you into a specific look. It's going to be big and bulky, and that kind of leads me into my third problem. Most drummers who are in the touring stage who want to have this convenience are going to want custom drums. They're going to want to be able to choose their own style because it's often seen that the drum is the center of the stage. And they would not be happy with being told you have to have this specific style. So if you're going to customize it and try and figure out unique solutions, that again is going to get very expensive for production. And then lastly, this kind of touches back to what Kevin talked about, which is that the internals are going to be rattled with every drumstick, which is not going to be durable. And since his point was it really has to be, if you're going to be charging enough money for this, then people are going to get unhappy if it breaks because you're just using your drum like you're supposed to use your drum. So with all of these negative factors, I felt like moving on to a separate device design was a better move. This way you could have the motors off the drum itself and you wouldn't have to worry about affecting the sound or affecting the aesthetic. So I figured I would try to ideate a little bit on this. Most of my designs ended up looking fairly similar in terms of the motors have to be in contact with the tension rods, so they have to be in some proximity to them. And then you want it to be able to fit over the drum reasonably and be something you can hold. So you're going to need some kind of handle. And most of these would make sense to branch out from the center. Some benefits of this design: it has fewer motors. At most, it's going to have 24 motors, which I'll explain later, compared to the 52 minimum, which is definitely less expensive. The motor location is better because they're not attached to the drum, won't affect the sound. Aesthetic freedom: the drummers don't have to worry about messing with custom drums, especially if they already have a drum set that's been customized. You don't have to change any hardware on it. And it can be mass produced, which again cuts down on the cost. There's greater durability too. So this solves the problem that Kevin was mentioning, where you won't be damaging the motors when you're playing your drum set like you typically want to. There were still two challenges though, which was resizing is required with this one. Typical drum sizes range from 8 to 18 inches, and that's in every single drum set. So when you're tuning one drum set, if you're having one device to tune that one drum set, it has to be able to somehow adjust to fit every drum size. But you can't confuse the user, because if you try to get complicated and make it adjust in a fancy way that doesn't make sense and isn't easy to follow, people aren't going to want to use it because it's too much effort. And then second, there's a variable lug number. Typical drums either have 6, 8, or 10 lugs, that's where the number 24 comes from, because when you add those all up, that's 24. And so you want to be able to adjust quickly and effectively between those different lug numbers so that people don't have to switch and take a lot of time, especially again in a live situation, with the numbers of lugs. And again, you also can't confuse the user because this could get complicated. So for solving the first problem, my first idea on the left was to try to use extenders, much like Rebecca's previous unit, where it has projecting arms coming out of it. But I found that this wouldn't work too well because all of the arms would have to be secure, which means they all most likely have to lock, and you have to be able to adjust it quickly. So you'd at least need to limit it to 1 or 2 locking points, because you want to just have your arms and arms free to be able to grab 2 points and then pull and extend it. But that wouldn't provide enough stability to the other arms in order to lock. So my second solution, after I had gotten some input from Gabe, was to investigate hyperboloids, which sounds complicated, but it's basically that as you twist an object, the central point is going to get smaller. And we'll look at that later in a more detail. But for now, that was the solution that I went with. And I found that that worked well enough to only require twisting as opposed to certain kinds of extension. And then the variable lug number. This, again, my first idea on the left was to simply pull off arms that you're not using. But once you do that, you have to then adjust the other arms to be in the correct ratio to fit the 6 pattern. So, because every single time you're dividing 360 degrees by whatever number of lugs there are. So you can't just pull off the arms and use the arms in their exact position. This created a crazy amount of complexity when you combine it with different twists from the first solution. And so I figured I would scrap that idea, figure out a new one. And this one on the right is simply having 6, 8, and 10 lug number arms, which are then attached to discs, which can then be attached to the main motor system, which again, I'll show more detail of that later. But for now, went on to prototyping. For this, I looked around my house and found that my water bottle was actually the perfect size for the handle that I was designing for the unit. So I simply cut out some cardboard to get a general feel for the sizing of the wider sections of the device, and then also attached some arms to just see what the different sizes would be and how they would have to adjust when twisting. And now I'd like to present you the final product, the rototuner. Here we are. And I'd like to get right to how to use it, because that's the main thing that a customer would want to understand. So it has 2 main steps. First, you place it on the drum. Second, you tune it with the app. That's basically all you need to know, aside from a little bit of specifics. So first, placing it on the drum, you look and you see how many lugs there are. In this case, there's 6. Then you look and see for your attachment for that number of lugs, this case on the far left. And then you simply attach it by letting it click into the bottom, as the animation shows. And the central part is housing the motor and all the electronics. Then if you want to take it back off, you can press the red button on the bottom, which will then release the arms and be easy to click off. Next, you check the diameter of the drum itself, in this case 18 inches, and you twist the unit to the desired length. And as you can see, there are numbers which have a clear light indicator, which is going to easily explain what the person is supposed to be doing. And when you look at the device, you get a sense that this is a dial on the top, clearly because it has the same kind of styling points as like a dishwasher or other dials that you're used to. There's also a handle on the bottom, which is the same exact shape which you use to grab the other side. Next, you place it on the drum, making sure that all the motors line up with the lugs and the tension rods. And next, you tune it with the app. Now that it is safely on the drum in the correct position, you then open up your phone. This was my first ideation of the app. I came up with a loading screen on the left-hand side, then a main menu in the middle, and a tuning screen on the right. And this was the final renders of that app. I went ahead and used a little bit more refinement on this stage just to be a bit more clear. And I decided to make the main menu and the tuning menu fairly simple because, again, you don't want to overcomplicate things. So in this case, you would select your drum on the main screen in the middle, and then you would go to the right screen, and you could either choose between presets that you have created, or you could choose between presets that other professional drummers have created for the same size drums, or you could make your own specific tuning or adjust a preset by using the up and down arrows or selecting the letter or the specific hertz of the sound and then typing in a number. And then after you've done that, you just hit tune and it is all set. And then next, that signal is being sent to the motherboard via Bluetooth, and it's being powered by the red battery underneath it. The signal gets sent to the pin connectors on the side, which you can see here. Then the pin connectors send the signal to the disc with the arms on it, which then makes its way through the arms down to the motor at the end. This will then tune the individual tension rods all at once very quickly, and this will get the rough tune of the drum. But again, that's not specific enough to actually sound professional. So in order to get a more fine-tuned sound, there are microphones inside the arms which listen to the individual tension rod that is being activated, and then a arm with a motor will strike the drum, producing the noise just outside of the tension rod. This is how you tune drums anyway, and how you check the specific tension rod's sound. So the drum will do this in sequence where it strikes the drum on each arm very quickly. And again, you can do this a lot faster than a human can, and it will use the same technology that you would find in the electronic tuner that I mentioned in the beginning, that's the competition. It would use that same kind of listening and then adjusting afterwards to do all of this automatically. Everything is also powered by USB-C, so it's very easy to recharge. And next, I have a few colorways. The main seller would be black, but we also have a blue and brass color and a white and black color. And lastly, just a bit about pricing. The main components that I had to consider when estimating pricing was the motherboard, battery, aluminum body, which is what most of the body we've made out of, an Actobotics planetary gear motor, which is the specific model that I used in the renders, and then the microphone as well. The final price that I've picked for it at the moment is $749.99. That might sound very expensive, but drumming is expensive. A single 16-inch crash cymbal is almost $300. One single performance kick drum is almost $1,000. A collector series set is $3,500, and a custom 7-piece set is almost $10,000. So for, again, my target market, which is typically going to be touring musicians, who are going to be paying that amount of money for a drum set, they would not mind paying $750 for a tuning unit that does essentially everything for them, and gives them a lot of convenience, cuts down on time, and helps them do things more efficiently. So in summary, I just go back to my goals and my solutions. First, I wanted to remove the need to tune by ear, which I have done that by adding the ability to tune reliably via mics and motors. Second, I decided to make tuning drums simpler, and I believe I've done that through only making it necessary to know the 2 steps involved in tuning. And especially once you get this process down, it's very quick. You just put the device on the drum, hit tune, you're done. And third, it makes tuning drums faster. The motors could lessen the time needed by half because, again, they're all tuning at once, and then it also gets a fine tune quickly through a mechanism. And the nice thing is, because it's not attached to the drum, you could just take the device off if you chose to and fine tune it afterwards yourself, which many drummers would probably do anyway. So this has been my presentation on the Rototuner. Thank you all very much. And if you have any questions, you can text Gabe at that number on the screen. Thank you very much.
Excellent job, Will. First question, you mentioned how much it's going to cost. Do you have an idea of where you might sell this product?
I think I would likely sell it online or in music stores. Typically, you'd probably get better advertising quickly online and then move into music stores after. But at the same time, if you could break in by word of mouth with top-end musicians, that's often how a lot of products are advanced. Is one musician will say, "Hey, I just saw you using something on tour. Like, what was that?" Because people will be traveling together. So that's another good possibility, is just word of mouth.
Another question. What program did you use to model all of this? Because I know that you weren't using your laptop.
Correct. I used Shaper 3D, which is an iPad program that I started using when I started doing more CAD during junior year.
This is a great testament to the modeling capabilities, not only of yourself, obviously, but also of the iPad. So thank you for giving us this case study.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you concerned about the durability of the arms? It looks like if they're twisting a lot to adjust to different drum sizes, they might be enduring some wear and tear.
No, I'm not really concerned about that just because I modeled all of the internals as well, and they're all attached with very secure points. And there's never going to be a lot of weight resting on them. The only weight that's going to be resting on it is the weight of the unit itself. So yeah, there's no real forces operating on the arms. And since they're made of aluminum anyway, with strong joints inside, then I don't believe that would be an issue.
I understand that the high levels of humidity as well as temperature affects the drum's tuning. Have you considered this issue with your project?
Yes, that was actually one of the original reasons why I considered including them in the drum hoops, because I figured if you had them included, you could just plug it in and adjust it every single day. The nice thing is, again, with humidity, if you were only relying on tension, that could be a more severe problem because the shell could expand and it could deform, making tension tougher. And then if it only relied on tension to understand where it's supposed to be tuning to, then it could think that it's tighter than it is because the shell is expanded. But because it also operates off of using mics and sensing where the tune is specifically, then it combats that problem by allowing the drum to realize, oh, whoops, we're a full step down further than we should be, so let's just adjust for that. So I think that the dual mechanism of having the tension tuning and the microphone tuning should alleviate all those problems. And if for some reason the tension somehow got off from what it was supposed to be, you can always reset your preset to adjust for that, to say, oh, for some reason it's always tuning a little low. I'm just going to go back in and up it a half step in the app, and then it tunes it a little bit higher.
Okay. I'm asking, this is me asking the question, did you consider octopuses in branding, since this is very reminiscent of their shape?
I didn't, although it's definitely similar to their shape. I think most of my pull for branding was more to try to explain a little bit of the product in the name. So if I went with something with octopus and more like, I don't know, an animal characteristic thing and played that up, number one, I think the drumming community, some guys would enjoy it. Other guys, like a serious jazz musician, would never use that. He would just think it's goofy and be like, no, I'm not going to use that product. So I didn't want to alienate some users. And then also I wanted to help, if you're scrolling through the internet and you're looking for a drum tuner and you see this, you see roto tuner. Okay, roto, rotation, something with spinning. I'm a little curious, as opposed to like octopus tuner or some kind of other element that even I considered using, like sun with a sun flare thing. So like a solar tuner, and some of the other words just seem to speak of something different than the tuner was actually doing. And so I wanted to help be more clear to the audience, since it can be a kind of confusing product in of itself anyway.
I appreciate you humoring me and taking my question so seriously, but I did know that you put a lot of great thought into your branding, and I wanted you to get into that a little bit more. Did you consider making a cheaper version of the product?
I did. The main issue is that a lot of the mechanics of how to tune faster are linked to more expensive products. You could try to make it the main place where you would cut off the cost would be with the motors and the electronics. So you could try to make a manual one, or you could end up trying to make a version that doesn't include the mics, because that would be the main part that is a little extra to get the exact tune. which I think that would be the more likely of the two, is instead of trying to figure out something manually, which could get broken a lot more easily, and then it's complete junk. I think using just the tension could be okay. And it could get drums to a general range of correctness, but I know even for myself, I have a drum downstairs that one of the tension rods is completely rusted, and the lug, it doesn't turn in the lug easily for the first like 6 or 7 turns. And so if the machine would not be able to tune it, because you'd have to manually tighten that one, and then it just gets kind of hairy. So I think the easier solution was to be able to have both a combination. Plus, since my audience is a little more expensive, that was more my target.
Sure. Then another question: how does one become friends with these high-profile drummers? How do you find yourself in that situation?
Well, there's actually several famous musicians that are all from my home church in Connecticut. So Kevin and Alex, and actually another guy, Matt Podesla, he plays with Matt Mayer, and previously played with Matt Redman, and he plays guitar. But they were all just contacts from home. So it was a lot of just who you know. And it tends to happen that way anyway, where even if it wasn't a direct contact, like I could have probably contacted people through Kevin Rooney or others to try to get to even more professional drummers, but it's just a step ladder of being certain steps removed from people.
And with that, have you shared your final product with them and gotten any feedback from them yet?
I have not yet, but I plan to do that soon. It was all focused on the presentation up until this point, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
Great job. I think that just about does it for questions. So everyone, if you wouldn't mind joining me in congratulating Will with either the reaction button or showing your appreciation for him on your screen. Will, great job.
Thank you.